The Harry Potter series is one of the most outstanding series in the universe, with some amazing film adaptations to the books, to new movies expanding on those books such as Fantastic Beasts, tons of video games. There's a theme park which is actually the Wizarding World of Harry Potter at Universal Orlando Resort, and so much more. Although there is a stage play in this Harry Potter stadium, and the flight is called The Cursed Child. It is supposed to be the 8th book in the series. It picks up to where the last book had left off. The script was based off by Jack Thorne, and he collaborated with John Tiffany, especially with J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. During my time when I was a junior in high school, when I was in English class, I decided to give it a shot, but unfortunately, I was let down even more than I thought. And ultimately, a lot of people have seen the book too, and read it, and they were also hated by this book as well. And I never seen the play version of this. So in this video, I'm going to discuss so many flaws I've seen in this book, and discuss why it is. On top of that, however, I will give some credit, and hopefully give some good things that I did like to make sure I end on a good note. Obviously, there will be some major spoilers for this book, as well as the rest of the book and the series too. So there's your warning. Now let's get started. As I said, the script follows from right where the Deathly Hallows left off, where Albus Severus goes to Platform 9 3/4, says goodbye to his family, and goes to Hogwarts. The plot follows with Albus Potter, who is Harry's son, and Draco's son, Scorpius Malfoy, and the two become best friends. They bond living in their father's shadows. For Albus, he lives in the shadow of the Chosen One, and Scorpius lives in the shadow of his father, who was a Death Eater. They meet a girl named Delphi, and their plan was to go back in time and save Cedric from the Triwizard Tournament. And even Delphi decides to turn their back on them, and even decides to go back the night where Voldemort tried to kill Harry and stop the prophecy. And as ridiculous as this might seem, J.K. Rowling herself said that this book is considered canon. I personally don't think this book should be considered canon. Ultimately, it ruins the source material, including the rest of the original series, and for those who have already read the 7 books, shouldn't either. One of the biggest flaws that this novel is based upon are time turners. They make the appearance in The Prisoner of Azkaban, and in that, Hermione uses the time turner to let herself and Harry be able to go back in time and save Buckbeak, especially save Sirius from the Dementors. They also make their appearance in the Order of the Phoenix, and ultimately, J.K. even decides to destroy them, and not only that she brought them back is because she brought back 2 of these things. That's right, 2 of the things. The way they use in The Cursed Child is probably the opposite of how they were in the 3rd book. In the 3rd book, Hermione and Harry were able to go back to the present and would make their fine and perfectly. But in this one, it's sort of different, as they would age and eventually die on the spot. So that means that both the adults, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and Draco, especially the kids, should have aged in their mid-30s. All of this is completely out of place and so awful in this book. The one thing that is absolutely by far the worst in this book are one of the 2 main villains, Voldemort, aka Tom Riddle, and Voldemort's daughter, Delphi. Yes, that's right, Voldemort's daughter. This is probably the worst thing that I've ever seen in a book. You expect me to believe that Voldemort had sex.
Excuse me, I have to go and vomit.
Granted, it was with Bellatrix. So if he was gonna do it with anyone, it would most likely be her. But no, we would never see this happen. And it's probably the most weirdest thing that I really don't want to see in this book. We all know Voldemort's character in the original 7 books. We all know that he doesn't need or wanted anyone in his life, and he doesn't understand the concept of love. All he wanted was himself, and he wants to be by himself. And it's not like he needed or wanted an heir. He thought he would live forever, and just for the way of his own approval. As for Bellatrix, she should have been 7 to 8 months pregnant during Malfoy Manor right before the Battle of Hogwarts. It is absolutely ridiculous. And speaking of which, one of the things that this book was how they messed up the last things from the last book, where Harry's scar had not hurt him at all, and that all was well. And now all of a sudden, his scar hurts again, and the threat of Voldemort is coming right back. Harry also lost the ability to speak Parseltongue, and now he has that ability again. And even so, with the dream sequences you have of him dreaming of the future, that is not how it was able to work in the books. In the books, he can only see what was going on in the present. It once again just shows how lazy these writers are. Now let's talk about the characters. I feel like one thing I have to talk about is the way they portrayed Harry in this book. He is absolutely ruined in this book. He is a terrible father and a straight-up jerk. The one line that struck me that is certainly out of character is right after Albus says to his father that he wished he wasn't his dad. He then replies saying, "There are times he wished you weren't my son." The Harry from the original series would never say something like this. That's the worst line that a parent could ever say to their child. He then continues to be a jerk in many ways, as he disrespects McGonagall, something that he always looked up to and respect for very dearly. He then rudely says to McGonagall that she didn't have any children, and even says in the script that she was deeply hurt by this. He then tells Ginny, "The professor knows what I mean." The professor? Are you freaking kidding me? He then rudely cuts Ginny off, and even says to McGonagall that he will bring the school down. The school that he loved, the school that was his escape home as a boy. This is something that Harry from the original series would also never do. He would treat both of them with respect and love. But here, he does the complete opposite. And Ginny even discusses about his anger issues, and even says the accusation in her voice when he says to him, "What did you say to our son, Harry?" I know that Harry from the original series would never get angry like this, but he always gets angry in the Order of the Phoenix when it comes to Voldemort being in his head. But still, Harry is completely awful in this book. Even Harry and Ginny's relationship was beyond awful in this book, but it feels more opposite of how their relationship was when it was handled way better in the original series and books. And also, Harry goes on to literally sign autographs in this book, which is also something that the Harry we all know and love would never do. Ron is another character that is also described in this book, as he goes up from being somewhat dumb and more of a little bit of a comic relief-ish side of character. I can see the similarity of movie Ron with Rupert Grint in this one, as we all know that Ron's greatest moments were being taken away to Hermione at this point, but we all know that Steve Kloves says that his favorite was Hermione. In the original series, Ron is more of a talented, famous, powerful, and strong character and has a big personality, but in The Cursed Child, he's acting more a lot like Fred and George in this one. Albus Potter is the main character in this story, and I honestly cannot identify with him in the slightest. I actually hate the kid. He's such a whiner and a terrible son, and he's so ungrateful to his parents as well. I feel like I have to talk about Hermione in this one. They made a black woman to cast her character, and I honestly realized that this outraged a lot of people. It outraged me as well. Cedric Diggory is another character I want to discuss as well. When Albus and Scorpius go back in time, they made Cedric lose the Triwizard Tournament and made him become a Death Eater. That's right, a Death Eater, because he got so mad that he didn't win a tournament. The fact that they made him is complete BS. This also made him kill Neville, meaning that Neville did not kill Nagini, and this made Voldemort return and won the battle. This is Cedric, the most kind person to everyone and the most loyal kid in the Hogwarts history. And even so, he was a Hufflepuff for God's sake. There was no way that this young man would even become so disappointed of him losing a tournament and becoming evil would join Voldemort like this. It is so disappointing, and it doesn't belong in a Harry Potter book. Another worst thing I want to discuss is the Trolley Lady scene. They turned the Trolley Lady Witch in the Hogwarts Express into a monster to prevent any students from escaping. Why they thought this would be a good idea, I don't know. Now, with all the characters that I discuss, I feel like I have to discuss Scorpius, as he's at least a little bit likable. The one thing that the writers did right, however, is the way they made me feel for Scorpius. His mother, Astoria Greengrass, aka Draco Malfoy's wife, is dead, and his dad is hard on him. Now, as much as I hated this book, there were some moments that I did actually like. The biggest thing is the appearance of Severus Snape, which I found a little more odd to me since he was already killed. But there's one thing that I like is the conversation between Harry and Severus, where he discusses his son, Albus Severus. Snape then says, "Tell Albus Severus that I'm proud he carries my name." Another thing that I really enjoyed is a dream sequence, although if only it would be much more meaningful and would consider it to be canon in this one, is where Petunia takes Harry to his parents' grave. The one thing that gives me chills is when Petunia tries so hard to fight her emotions. And speaking of Petunia, I also like the fact where she keeps the blanket for him right after she died. Another thing that I absolutely like is the conversation between Harry and Amos Diggory. In this conversation, Amos says to Harry that my son was a spare. He was of course referencing to what Voldemort had said right before Peter Pettigrew was about to kill Cedric.
Kill the spare! Avada Kedavra! No!
Amos's grief was really well handled in this book, and he tells Harry that Cedric was the greatest thing he ever had to him, and it breaks my heart every time when I first read that. He then says, how many people had to die for the boy who lived? And this is probably one of my favorite quotes in the entire script. This is, of course, what Harry's struggle is and his weakest spot after his parents, Cedric, Sirius, Dobby, and so much more that all died for Harry to make sure to protect him. This unfortunately was ruined when they brought up the Time Turners for the very first time. I also love the fact that Ron and Hermione redo their marriage, and the fact that Draco was jealous of the trio's friendship that they had. So there you go. Everything you need to know about The Cursed Child, and the fact that I completely took this book apart with many flaws that I really hated, but ended on a good note. I personally, 100% do not consider this book to be canon, and most Harry Potter fans will agree as well.